Welcome to the Insight Scoop, Ion Ivy's podcast series that provides direct insight into the world of college applications and profile building. My name is Shanza Khan, and I am the head counselor and founder of Ion Ivy. Today, we have with us a student from Learning Alliance DHA, Maheen Asim. Welcome, Maheen.
Thank you so much.
Maheen aims to apply to schools in the US and Pakistan in hopes of pursuing international relations. She's a passionate young woman advocating for women's rights and enjoys debates. Now, you may ask yourself, which extracurricular activities should I partake in? How many internships do I need to do? Do awards and competitions really matter? Well, luckily for you, Maheen has figured it all. And having participated in countless activities and won multiple awards, Maheen is an ideal guest for this episode of the Inside Scoop. So let's get started. Thank you so much.
I think that was a rather humbling introduction, Ms. Shanza. We'll see how much you scored me next year when we actually start applying.
No, Maheen, I mean, your record is most impressive, as our guests will soon find out. So I'm first going to set the stage for our listeners, and then we're going to dive into your portfolio. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the US application process, know that when you are filling out the common application, you have to fill out 10 extracurriculars and 5 academic awards. Now, the Common App will ask you to list from grade 9 onwards, how many hours did you spend on this particular activity? What was the duration that you did that particular activity? And for the awards, they will ask you, did you win this award at the international level, at the national level, at the provincial or state level, at the inter-school level, or at the school level? Most of our students think that as long as we have done some community service, SOS and Door of Awareness continue to remain very popular, or we've done an internship over here or over there, that is sufficient. But Maheen figured out early on that that is not the way to go, that extracurriculars need to be aligned with the subject that they're going to apply for. And that is what gives you their spike. So Maheen, let's break it down. When should I start participating in extracurriculars and activities? What is your advice for your juniors?
For me, I think as soon as possible, because you just sort of get into the routine and, you really like winning, you develop that kind of passion for whatever you like. I mean, if you start around middle school, you can figure out what you really like. And by the time you are in like your O levels or high school or whatever, you can do the things that you think you're good at and the things that you actually like. You can streamline yourself a bit. But overall, I think it's never too late. You can always try out different things whenever you want. But ideally, you should start at like grade 9, because you have to show that you were consistent over the 4 years and you weren't just cramming extracurriculars in your last 2 years. Away levels are right, the counselor is gonna do this, the counselor is gonna do that, because that's not gonna happen. Your application should show who you are, what your interests are. So according to that, as soon as you can really figure out what you want, like that's what I really did. I loved doing debates. So I started MUN training in grade 7. I didn't go to competitions, but I was just getting coached by my seniors and that. So for me, that was what really put things into perspective, that I want to do debates eventually. I want to do this kind of things. International relations really interests me, because I like knowing how countries conduct their international dealings, how diplomacy, etc. works. So I think that as soon as you can start, because a lot of children do it at a young age. Like I have seen my friends, like for example, Zaina, she swims and she's been doing it since she was really young. So it took her time to develop that kind of skill. So as soon as you can, but ideally start at grade 9, because you want to spread them out.
So, Dekho, you raised a very important point. Okay, by grade 9, the clock starts ticking. Anything you have done prior to 9, if you were the national swimming champion in grade 8, unfortunately, can't report it on your Common App. So it's good to identify what things you are passionate about or what things are fun for you. So the other part I liked, you mentioned you enjoy debating, which is, and you like, learning about different committees and so on, which is intrinsically linked with the major you're applying to, which is IR. Tell me what positions, if any, do you hold in your school in any kind of debating or MUN society, and what kind of exposure have you had? At what level do you participate in?
So I have always been a member of the Learning Alliance Debating Society since I was like in grade 6. Like it was not a question. Every year we would have society signups, and I would just not even think about it. I would go to the rep and I'd be like, okay, sign me up. And I have won 2 international MUNs, 3, 4 local MUNs, and then I switched to parliamentary debating. I'm still trying to get really good at it. I mean, I'm training over the summer and everything. I'm trying my best. It wasn't my piece of cake, but it was, the kind of challenge I wanted at that time. I have won one tournament and I have judged 2, 3 tournaments for parliamentary debates because it's like a part of the learning process. So I won the GCU tournament. This year I was in the finals, and I was the 6th best speaker at the entire tournament. And other than that, I take part in the entire season, whatever tournaments are happening within Lahore. So in terms of debates, that's all I have done, and I eventually plan to apply for the debating society presidency when I get into my A levels.
So Maheen, I think this conversation is very important to have, because it's one thing to say, I like debating. And I know many students who say, I like debating. But in America, or, when application officers are assessing how good is this particular candidate, they are not only looking at participation, they are looking at proficiency, which is how good are you at debating? And so having these wins at the international level, like you mentioned, you won what, 2, 3 awards at the international level, and you have rankings at the national level and at the inter-school level, show that you are good at what you do. And then you took it a step further. You volunteered to become a judge. So this is, when you're volunteering in a capacity related to your interest, that's what we call extra brownie points. So you've kind of tapped on that very well, which you are actually posing yourself as a learning experience, that I'm learning more as a judge, but it also counts as volunteer work. So it's like double dipping, what I call it. And so you've done that really well. Now, what I want our viewers, however, to pause here. Just because you may like something, in this case, let's say debating, if you are not after 2, 3 years, getting any kind of position, and I have met students like this who say, Miss Shanza, I spent so much time in attending debating camp or going to our school debating society. But when I ask them, have you won anything at any level? And the answer is no. Then the question to ask yourself is, am I spending my time wisely? Would I be better off utilizing the hours I'm spending for debate prep somewhere else, where I can showcase a win? Perhaps that may be writing. Perhaps that may be something else. In your case, it works because not only are you good at it, it's something directly linked with your major. Let's break down your CV in other levels as well, Maheen. So we have debating. What else have you been doing to showcase your academic passion?
See, the thing is, my school has been really focusing on community service nowadays because we have, really lovely counselor working with us who really advised us to do that. So for me, I did a 3-month internship with Beti, and I worked for their media campaign. And so it was online, which I really recommend to, and any of my friends, those who say, oh, hame ijazat nahi milegi, or that we can't go like dur padega, because everyone has their own situationships. या फिर किसी को I have to travel and I needed to be online. I think that is really good that if you work for Beti, because they offer you this facility that, it's online, so you can work for them from home at your own comfort. And I think that's really good adaptive thing, because nowadays, many jobs are also online, and you can just and the kind of time commitment they give is also very flexible for students. So I think that one was a really good experience. But other than that, I was global youth ambassador for Chicago sister cities. I know, and Shanza's daughter was also same year, and we had that meeting online as well. Other than that, I've been working with Shaukat Khanam for the past 1 year, as I'm their student ambassador. So I have different responsibilities, like I have to find students for internship, I have to advertise their posts, etc. I do try to get my juniors to volunteer sometimes, and I have to, and they have their own media campaigns, etc. And we have to contribute. Whenever they have an event, they just call us up and are like, if you're available, please come by. So we just have to do those kind of duties for that. I really love Shaukat Khan, and it's such a great organization. And for me, becoming their ambassador was great. When I got called for the interview, I was so excited. My mom went with me.
So that's really cute, Maheen. The thing I kind of want to bring once again to our viewers' attention is that you tend to do your community service, whether it was Beti or others, centered usually around women's issues, women's empowerment. Even the leadership program you got selected at for Chicago Summer Sisters, which is, by the way, a highly competitive program. I believe there were only 2 or 3 students from Pakistan who were selected.
There were only 2 girls from Pakistan and 30 students globally. So, 2 students from Pakistan is a very big deal.
So, and even the projects you were doing there was centered around women's issues, correct?
Yes. Yeah, I did my project on domestic violence because
Right.
it's a very common issue. And I think that was what related to me most, because it's one of the most taboo issues in society. And the other ones were related, but I thought that this could be covered at the most major extent. And that's how these programs are. They try to make you understand everything in so much depth that you really, get down to the roots of the cause you're trying to support. And almost every student needs to have some cause they support, so that we can be, valuable members in society, because that's what also universities look for. They look for students with good civic sense.
I want to highlight 2 points from this, Maheen, and that's why I'm using you as a guinea pig for this podcast, in case you haven't realized. One is, when you do whatever you're doing, you tend to do it around a theme, whether it is IR, or in this case, when you're doing community service, it's working around women empowerment or gender equality, whether it's with Beti, whether it's with the Chicago Summer Sisters. The other is, as you mentioned, your volunteer work at Shaukat Khanam, you have de facto obtained a leadership position by becoming an ambassador. So that was something not directly linked with the other women-centered issues that you were doing, but you got an opportunity to become a student ambassador for a renowned organization, and that showcases your leadership skills. Most schools, like where you currently, and you're saying, oh, I'm going to target, coming on my student council. But in O levels, students don't really get an opportunity to showcase leadership skills. And so by becoming a student ambassador, you kind of bypassed all of that. And
yeah, but the thing is, there's this large information barrier, right? Because we have this culture where parents push their kids to study, you have to get these kind of grades, etc. And there are very few students who are actually motivated by themselves or who have this instinct. So I think that when that kind of information exists out in the open from schools, like for example, now that we are working with Ion Ivy, we have that information. We're getting volunteer opportunities every week. We have this entire tab. I think all students are much more better off comparatively, because at least they have that information. Now it's actually up to them. They can't complain about not knowing.
And that's, and I think it's very important for students to take the initiative and see what's out there. There's so much out there that they can do in at any level. Maheen, talk about some of your other engagements as well on the extracurricular side.
Okay, so I have done many competitions. I have done future problem solving program. I did the I was national winner. I did it with my friend Zaina. She's amazing. And I have done writing competitions. I was national fifth position at Bulgarian writing competition. And other than that, I received a 30% scholarship to any London-based program from Immersed Education. And they were really great because when I informed that I would not be attending because I was not able to commit to that, they offered me more scholarship, but it still wasn't enough. So other than that, it has been really great experience for me because the organization is so nice. They try to facilitate young students around the world and all that. And I think once you really get into the rolling of these extracurriculars, you keep finding more opportunities for yourself around that. So I think in terms of that, for me, I really enjoyed writing, and I discovered that through INRE because Miss Shanta would put me in writing competitions. She's like, you're such a great hand. Why don't you try this? Why don't you try that? And then the school, when they found out, they also pushed me further. So for me, once I got into that mindset that I was doing extracurriculars, my school would give me opportunities, and I had INIB giving me opportunities. And eventually it just became this pattern that, I would always know when an essay competition is happening.
So it's not just that you know when an essay competition is happening, Maheen. You took out the time and effort to participate in that essay competition. Tell our viewers what FBSPI is and how
Okay,
it works, because most students are unfamiliar with these competitions and you've participated in a bulk of them. So give them a little bit of details and taste about what it is. And you're the national winner for Pakistan. You came first. So, it's a case in point that you can do it.
Okay, so future problem solving program is this. They have these different types of competitions. I took part in one particular one where we had to solve issues. Like they have an essay based one and all of that as well. It was the first time that it was being held in Pakistan, which was a really big deal because they usually, there was no access here to it initially. So when we decided to participate, we did not have as many resources, etc. So we had a teacher from school. She coached us for it, and me and Zaina, we did all the tests for it properly, and then we prepared. And then when we had the final round, we sat and we solved it in 2 hours. And then when we got the result, it was just amazing. And I think the best part about it was that I was actually so interested in it that I did further research on it because of that. And future problem solving, I did it when I was in O2, and I was already preparing for my global perspective exam. So for me, it was like, I really liked the entire process.
Maheen, you raised something important, and I would like you to be honest with the juniors, particularly who may be tuning in today. You, alhamdulillah, are so vibrant outside the classroom. How do you juggle the academic commitments alongside the extracurriculars because of two reasons? One, there can be no compromise on academics. That is, your grades are going to determine what your target match and safety schools are going to be. The other concern I hear is often from parents who are like, Ms. Shanza, if we let our student do this particular internship, or if we send our student to engage in these particular activities, then how are they going to cope with their academics? Their grades are going to suffer. So how did you navigate this process?
See, firstly, the thing is that there's no one way of getting into university. I think you need to always take a unique approach that suits you best. You need to cater it according to your interests, etc. You can do literally everything, right? But if it's not according to your interest, then it's probably not going to matter. So, firstly, that. But secondly, in terms of grades, my grades were fine. They were not the best, but they were fine. But other than that, if I get it, it's a parent thing, they always worry about their child's grades. But I think that's what's great about O-level. You need to study at a particular time for your end grades. And if you just manage to, I think with the right kind of time management and help, you can do anything. Because I've seen it. I've seen fellow students do it, manage both things side by side. You just need a good schedule. And that's the thing with our with our Pakistani moms. They can manage any schedule for you.
Okay, Pakistani moms, you have a lot of burden on you for managing your children's schedules. So, hats off to Pakistani moms. Maheen, how many competitions should a junior participate in? You didn't start winning right away,
Yeah, I did, for
right?
sure. At the start, I would be like,
if you were to guide, the O1s and the O2s and the O3s, what would you tell them?
see, the thing is that if you started around middle school, you'd probably be good at what you want to do and you'd be more streamlined. So at that point, yes, you should be winning, but it's okay if you don't win everything. But if you take a start at O1, I think by the time a year passes and you get into O2, you would have more experience, you would have more information, you'd have more you can handle yourself better in these competitions, you can handle the pressure. I think at that point you should probably start winning, and you'd be more streamlined either way, because you'd realize, for example, some might say, okay, art competitions aren't for me at all, science competitions aren't for me, maybe this is for me in particular. So I think by the time you're in O2, it would be better if you just start winning eventually, because I think 1 year is enough to really get the hang of it.
I think that's good advice.
It's a time commitment. You invest.
Another experience of yours, Maheen, that I would like you to share is the pivot you made. So I remember that when we started off talking about profile building and what path you wanted to go down, at the beginning of O1, you were very adamant that I want to go towards pre-med, and that's when you did an internship at Amar Hospital, or rather a shadowship, and that had to be specially arranged because most hospitals will not let a high school student anywhere near them.
They wouldn't even let you enter, probably.
But what did this experience teach you, and why did you decide to pivot from medicine to IR?
Okay, so the thing is, I was that nerdy kid, so it was kind of always, in my mind that, okay, I'm a nerdy kid, I should be a doctor. No offense to doctors, I've seen really cool doctors as well. I started off studying O-level sciences, and I was like, okay, I can make this work. I'll do this, I'll do that. And then I did. I also took part in science-based competitions. I went to AXEC and I went to Olympia Global. I came second place globally, but I eventually realized that it wasn't for me, and I think that's especially after the internship I did at Amar Medical Hospital, because I was there every day. I was shadowing doctors. I was shadowing their head nurses who were internationally renowned nurses. It was really good. It was really good, and it was eye-opening for me, that I realized that, okay, this is something that I admire, but it's not necessarily for me. And I obviously, it was sort of different. I had to tell my parents that, okay, my profile is sufficient for other platforms as well. And I think Ion Ivy helped me maintain that diversity in my portfolio as well, while being even though I was like relatively streamlined in terms of my like CV, but I still think that I had that kind of diversity that you'll find 2-3 competitions related to science, and I just stopped because I realized that it's not for me.
Which year did you do this shadowship, Maheen?
I did it after my O1 ended. So I think it was 2020 or 2021. I'm not exactly sure. My memory is hazy.
No, I think the more important point is you did it right after your O1, and the experience you are describing, that you admire these people, but you realize that this profession is not for you, gave you enough time to then say, you know what, I still have time to experiment elsewhere and build my profile elsewhere. I mean, I think students who perhaps do this for the very first time in O3 or at the end of A1, and if they come to that realization at that point in time, it's kind of late because, they've already been building
A
their
levels is
profile.
right around the corner, and you can't really choose safety subjects in A levels. I mean, obviously for O levels, you always have the option of keeping science to keep your options open, and it's pretty standard because in most schools, it's like in the like other forms of education, O level, you don't have the choice to choose your own subjects like you do in O levels. So I think O level science is a pretty standard choice most kids end up making because it's a safety choice. But for A levels, it's slightly different. You need to choose your interest, etc. Because subjects are harder, they're advanced. You need the kind of incentive to work for them that only comes from interest. So I think that it's really important to streamline your interest by that. And I think I was really lucky in terms of starting at O1 because it made me realize that okay, this isn't for me.
No,
Or I would probably be
okay.
teaching A-level sciences right now, and Miss Shanza would have been like, "Maheen, no."
No, so I think this is a frank conversation that children need to have with their parents about which way they are inclined to go, because my generation, still tends to point our children towards medicine, engineering, and law, whether or not there is an aptitude for it. And that's why we recommend two things. We recommend that you begin with psychometric testing because that allows us to see, you know, theoretically and via data, what are your inherent strong abilities and character strengths and weaknesses, and then suggest career paths. So that's the theoretical exercise, followed by step two, practical experience on ground via internships, volunteer work, shadowships, which can then teach you, okay, this is exactly what I want to do, or no, this isn't for me and I'd like to try something else. The reason this is so important is in Maheen's case, I know that she is planning to target the US. Is that your first country of choice still, Maheen?
Yes, it is.
So for the US, she will actually have 2 more years within a US university to declare her major. But in order to land into a competitive university, you need to have a narrative in your application. I am passionate about IR. I did debating in school and I have won at this level and that level, and I've judged these competitions. And once I graduate from Georgetown, I want to become a diplomat or I want to go into the UN. So you have to build that narrative. However, you actually have room within your first 2 years to do any subject you want. That's the beauty of the American education system. So technically, Maheen, you can, let's say, go to Stanford and after a semester call up Amma and say, Amma, you know what? I changed my mind. I'm becoming pre-med again and I'm going to do biology.
Oh.
So the American system gives you that flexibility. However, Maheen, if you were applying to the UK or if you were applying to Canada or for most other countries in the world, you had better know what you wish to do because you are going to be locked into that. So if you're applying for IR to Cambridge and you get accepted in Cambridge for IR or PPE, which is what they offer, then if you get accepted, that's what you're going to end up doing, because Cambridge is not going to say, oh, you're unsure, too bad. Because it doesn't have that flexibility built in their system. And so for many students are looking at countries around the world. You're looking at the US, but I know many students who are now looking at Canada for immigration purposes, or they're looking at Germany for immigration purposes. And these universities in these countries will ask you to apply against a course or apply against a major. And then if you get accepted in that major, you're going to end up doing that major. So you better know what you wish to do.
Yeah. But even in terms of the US, I think it's always good to be streamlined about what you want, because I think the kind of mental peace you have about knowing, okay, this is what I want, I think that's a lot better than, constantly changing your major until you decide that, okay, last year I need to decide what I graduate in.
And that's very important too, as you mentioned, having that peace of mind and contentment. I've figured it out. I've figured out my path. This is what I want to do. Maheen, if you were to suggest to your, juniors, are there any activities better for your CV compared to others in terms of leadership roles or volunteer work, or should there be a balance? What would your opinion be?
In particular, for me, I think community service is probably the best way to go about it, because I think that you find your cause as well in that particular pathway. I always prefer community service, helping others, and you get down to your community and all that. I find that amazing. But I think there should be a distinction between your interests as well from that. So maybe you should, keep a balance in the end of the day. Maybe do a 60-40, or keep a wise ratio in the end. But for me, I have always loved community service.
And I think that's great feedback. One other thing that students should keep in mind is different countries value extracurricular activities in a different proportion. So for students applying to the UK, it is usually an 80-20, 80% emphasis on grades, 20% on extracurriculars. They won't even ask you to furnish a CV. They won't even ask you to list your activities. It's incorporated as part of your personal statement. Canada places a lot of value on community service and leadership. In fact, there are many scholarships directly linked with community service. So you may want to consider Canada as well, Maheen. And then
Inshallah.
And then for the US, grades are the first step of the conversation. So, it's your extracurriculars, your activities, your profile, what kind of niche are you making for yourself, as well as your awards are really going to, matter in the end. So with that, Maheen, if you were to give any parting advice to your juniors on something they should do or not do, what would it be?
I think they should research a lot. I think that's the biggest part of applying to university, because, as Pakistani students, we're in a very distinct place from not just applicants of the USA, but international applicants in general. We are against the dollar right now, and there's so many other factors. There are particular percentiles for us to meet, for the SAT, etc. as well. So wherever you plan to apply, you just probably research it. You should have, meetings with amazing counselors, who have this kind of knowledge, and who, can talk to your parents about it as well. Because our parents were technically from a different time. I mean, there's a huge generation gap. I think the systems constantly keep changing as well. So you should know, for example, now the SAT is also digital, because I'm prepping for it. I know this because I'm prepping for it. So just probably do a lot of research, and in part of that, you'd find your interest as well as to what you want eventually. I think that's really and especially for me, that's what I'm doing, because I'm going to start my A levels, and it pata bhi nahi chalta. It's 2 years compared to O levels. 3 years feels longer.
So thank you so much for that, Maheen. Given that you've already achieved so much within 3 years, you are the first O-level student that we're having on this show. Otherwise, all our students are graduates, but I felt that you had achieved so much already, and with another year to go, I look forward to what heights you will go to, Maheen. Wishing you the best of luck, and thank you so much for taking out the time to be with us today.
No problem, Shanza. Anything for you.
Have a great one, Maheen, and thank you once again.